Um, hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to our panel discussion tonight around writing and motherhood. Just to give a bit of context in terms of the project that we've been delivering, Writing Around the Kids is a project for mothers of young children to connect with writing creatively. We're currently working with a brilliant group of women in Crawley in partnership with Crawley Museum and New Writing South, and are soon to be starting our next writing group in Littlehampton. Both Sam and myself are writers and mothers, and we began this project having recognised in our own lives how difficult it is to forge creative time for yourself. I'm Anna Jefferson. I'm a playwright and novelist. I've written for stage and screen since 2005. I've had 2 novels published, Winging It, which was published back in November last year, and Nailing It, which was just published in April just gone, just with Orion. And I'm currently working on my 3rd book. Over to you, Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Johnson. I'm a freelance writer and I've got a MA in creative writing from the University of Brighton. I've been facilitating creative writing workshops since 2017. I've had poetry in a couple of anthologies. I've had work performed in Brighton Fringe Festival, and I am very slowly writing my novel around my children.
And we're delighted to welcome you tonight to our Writing and Motherhood panel discussion. And we've got 4 exceptional female writers who've kindly agreed to share with us their experiences of being a writer. So we're just going to introduce you to our panel. Firstly, we have Sharon Dougal. She grew up in northwest Birmingham as part of a large Indian family. Her debut novel, The Ainsworth Times, was published by award-winning independent Blue Moose Books and was the Morning Star's Fiction Book of the Year 2016, as well as being Brighton City Reads 2017. Her short stories appear in anthologies, including The Book of Birmingham, Love Bites, fiction inspired by Pete Shelley and the Buzzcocks, and her second novel, Should We Fall Behind, was published last October to wide critical acclaim. It was chosen as the Prima Magazine Book of the Year in 2020 and has recently been selected as one of the 6 new titles to be featured on the BBC Book Club Between the Covers with Sarah Cox. In fact, that was on Monday just gone and it was absolutely brilliant. So if people want to watch that, they can watch it again on iPlayer.
We also have with us Kate Morrison, and her debut novel, A Book of Secrets, was published in 2019 by Jacaranda Books. It tells the story of a girl from Ghana in the 16th century, and she's hunting for her lost brother through Elizabethan underworld of spies, plots, and secret Catholic printing presses. A Book of Secrets was longlisted for the Historical Writers Association Debut Crown Award in 2020 and the Diverse Book Awards 2020. She started researching A Book of Secrets in 2003 and finally finished it 15 years later, and 2 children later, I should say. Many of her drafts were written while babies napped. She lives in West Sussex with her family and is trying to write another book set in Bronze Age Britain in between lockdowns and homeschooling.
We'd also like to welcome Jill Harvey. She studied English literature and language at university, and after graduating in 2000, trained as a secondary school teacher. After 8 years in education, she moved to France with her husband. She's a novelist and freelance writer. Her first novel, Everything is Fine, was published in May 2020 with Orion, and her second, Perfect on Paper, was just published last week.
And finally,
She writes regularly for magazines in the UK and the US, and a regular column for Writing Magazine, and Jill has 5 children.
Sorry about that. Finally, I'd like to welcome Eve Ainsworth along this evening. She's an award-winning and Carnegie-nominated children's author for both middle grade and teen readers. She was born and raised in Crawley and is one of 7 children. After her degree, she had a varied background working with HR and recruitment before landing a job that she loved, which was mentoring and supporting challenging and vulnerable students in a large secondary school. And it was this that inspired her first teen book, 7 Days. Her first novel for adults, called Duckling, will be published by Penguin Random House in spring of 22. She's fiercely proud of her working class roots and her large, loud family. She lives in Crawley with her husband and 2 young children and her crazy dog. Hi.
Welcome, everyone. Okay, so next up, we have some quick fire questions, which we have asked of all of our participants. So we're just going to quickly go through these questions and yes, see what the answers are. So Sam, do you want to ask the first?
Of course. So just to start off, the first question that I'm going to start with Sharon is, what book would you take to a desert island?
Gosh, I should have thought about this in advance and I didn't. I'm really sorry. So off the top of my head, I think I would take a very large volume of short stories, and it'd have to include some stories by some of my favourite short story writers like Annie Proulx and Alice Munro and Jhumpa Lahiri and John Cheever. So yeah, just a really, really big book so I won't get bored.
Brilliant. That same question then for you, please, Eve.
Sorry, it takes me a million years to unmute. I would take, I think, The Stand by Stephen King, because it's my very favourite book, but it's like about that big. So I think it would take me about a million years to get through it again. And I've read it about 3-4 times, and I don't ever get bored of it. So I think that would keep me amused. I'll find something in it again that I can reread and enjoy. So I'd go with that one.
Brilliant, thank you. Kate, what about you?
So I wanted to say something intellectual, but I know truthfully that it would probably be Riders by Jimmy Cooper. Again, because it's enormous and it's a real comfort read. So I think if I was stuck on a desert island, I could read it several times and not get bored because the characters are so well written.
Brilliant, thank you. And then so Gillian, that one for you.
Yeah, so I did think about this, and it's a similar answer to Eve, but a totally different genre, because I was thinking about it, and there's very few books that I would read again and again. I don't know if that's just because there's so much choice now and we're used to everything straight away, but there are some books I do return to, and one of them is Tony Parsons' Man and Boy series, I wouldn't be able to take the series, would I? So the first one. And every time I read it at a different life stage, I find new things in it. And I think because there's that depth and emotional impact to the writing, it'd be something that I could probably read several times without getting bored, hopefully.
Maybe we could find you a copy that, an anthology of all of them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. So your next quick fire question is, which author would be your star guest at a dinner party? So Kate, if we start with you.
Okay, so I'm cheating because I want 2 people, and I want Hilary Mantel and ideally Sarah Collins as well, who wrote The Confessions of Fanny Langton, because they're both amazing historical novelists, but they also both watch Selling Sunset, and I would like to talk to them both about historical fiction and Selling Sunset, so both those.
Fantastic. Okay, Gillian, who would you have?
So I was thinking that if I was actually having to spend time with these people, then I'd probably choose some of the authors that have become friends over the last year. So I'm in a group of authors called the D20s. We all debuted in 2020, and Nicola Gill and Kirsten Hesketh, we talk quite regularly, and I think I wouldn't want to be on a desert island with someone that intimidated me and I couldn't talk about writing because I just thought they were so brilliant. But if it was someone who's, I guess, who would be my kind of dream writer to meet, it would be probably David Nicholls and Nick Hornby. I really admire both of them. So, but I think if you're going to actually enjoy talking about writing and exploring it together, then I'd choose some writers that I've come on a bit of a journey with, because that would be comfortable and also really productive, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And Eve, who would your dinner party guest be?
Okay, well, I'm going to be a bit strange because both of mine are dead, and I'm hoping that's okay. Am I allowed to invite dead people? Okay, so the first one would be Agatha Christie, because she absolutely fascinates me. So I'd love to have her at dinner parties, find out exactly what she's about and how her brain works. And yeah, I'd love to pick her brain. So she'd be my first one. And my second one would be Sue Townsend, because she is my absolute heroine. She's a working class hero. She was amazing. She wrote while she was raising children and was very, very poor, very funny lady. So she would be amazing company. So they'd be my two women I'd love to have at my dinner party, definitely.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd like to be at that dinner party. And Sharon, how about yourself?
I'm going to cheat again, because to my dinner party, I'm going to invite Nick Cave. He has written one really bad novel, I reckon, but I'm such a fan, and he's such a brilliant songwriter. And I've never, writing a song is something I've always wanted to be able to do. And, I've never even tried, but I could pick his brains about that and then just kind of look at him admiringly.
You do have an electric guitar behind you though, Sharon, so that very much sets the scene.
Yeah, that's my son's, it's not mine.
Brilliant. Okay, so the last quick fire question then is, how old were you when you first decided to be a writer? I'm going to start with Eve this time.
Always catch me out, and I'm not quick enough. I always talk about this when I do school visits, and I tell children at school that I can't remember, because I used to run around my back garden when I was a little girl, when I was like 3 years old, and I used to tell stories to the squirrels and the birds out in my back garden, and my family used to think I was a nutcase, but I was actually storytelling. So for as young as I can remember, I was telling stories. And I remember being in a school assembly when I was 5, and a writer came in and said about being a writer and being an author. And I was a kid in the assembly that was like, I want to be a writer too. And I wrote my first story on my typewriter and sent it to Penguin, who I'm getting published by next year, when I was 8. And I got rejected. So I have been wanting to be a writer since I was very, very young. So yeah, it's always been my ambition.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I love the idea of you telling stories to the squirrels. Gillian, can I ask you that next?
Of course, yeah. So it's very similar in that I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be an author. But there's one particular, I used to read a lot. I expect that's the same for most of us. And there's a particular series I used to read when I was about 7 years old called The Garden Gang. And and they, when I found out that series was written by a 7-year-old, I had my first case of professional jealousy, because I was thinking, I've only got 2 years or I'm not as good as this writer. So I remember being quite ambitious about it and really just wanting to do it and writing all the time. It took me a lot longer than to the age of 7, but I kept going. So,
thank you.
To say something,
Yeah,
I have
sure.
to add this, because Gillian, I was about to say about the garden game, but I didn't want to run out of room. But I was exactly the same, and that's why I typed up my book at 7, because I wanted to be Jane Fisher. So I was exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Eve, can I just quickly ask you, does Penguin know that your current book that they're publishing was not your first submission to them?
No, I haven't told them, actually. I should tell them. They'll probably dig it out. It was called Muddles the Mouse. But yeah, it was exactly, I was absolutely jealous of this Jane Fisher, because she was 9, I think, when she was published, and I wanted to beat her. And I typed up this book about this mouse, and I was so upset when they rejected me. But they sent me a load of books, and they told me to keep writing. They were really lovely. But I did a tweet about it, Gillian, a few months ago, and so many writers replied saying, I was the same. And apparently she's influenced like a whole generation of writers. So she's an amazing woman.
Isn't it? Oh, well, I had to Google the book series just to find out about her again when I was thinking about it. And it's amazing that so many of us remember.
Brilliant. Okay. Sharon, can I ask you then?
Yeah, actually, my answer's a bit different, really, because I always read as a kid, but the idea of being an author or being a writer was not anything that was ever within, kind of my framework of reference, really. There was no one around me. I'm from a big Indian family in a city, grew up in a city working class area, and it just wasn't something that I don't think I even really understood that. there were such things as authors, even though I read a lot. So I'd say probably not until, my kind of 20s or early 30s even, did I actually want to be, think, oh, I really want to be a writer. Although my mum quite often reminds me that I did have a story up on the wall at school when I was 5. So
you did start young after all.
I was young, but I never kind of consciously thought this is what I want to be. I just never really realised I could be that until much later on.
Thanks, Sharon. Kate, how about you?
So similar to Eve and Gillian, I think I always told stories. So like I used to tell stories to my brother in the car on car journeys. And then I remember we did the Romans at school when I was about 7. You had this like pouch that you had to put a wish in, or like something they used to do with kids. And the thing I wrote was I wanted to write a book by the time I was 18. So again, I had slightly later. I wasn't aiming for 9. I was going for 18, which I didn't manage. But yeah, so just from as long as I can remember, I just wanted to write books. Yeah.
I think already that's kind of given us an idea that you just have to keep going. If it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't matter what age you are. You just have to keep at it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you all. As I said before, we have this our writing group in Crawley with our Crawley women, and we asked them if they had any questions that they'd like to ask of you, which they did. So we've kind of collated these questions together, and we're gonna ask you some questions from them. But also for anybody, any of the participants, if you would like to ask any questions of our panelists, please just kind of pop it in the Q&A, and we'll get round to as many as we can at the end. So the first burning question that we have for you is, what's your writing routine? How does your day look like as a writer? So maybe Gillian, if I start with you, and then if we could all, we can kind of have a chat about it afterwards. But yeah, Gillian, what's your day look like?
Okay, so the word routine's maybe a bit of an oversell for what I actually do, but I think if I'm always try to write in the mornings if I can, because I think my brain is functioning at its best then. If it gets to the afternoon, it's not so good. So when the kids go to school, that's when I really sit down at my computer and get on with things. Obviously, though, during lockdown over the last little while, or the school holidays or whatever may be happening at the time, it's not always convenient to do that. But and I got used to really, I found out a lot about myself during lockdown, I think, because I found out that I can write at different times if I have to. And actually that desire to write will mean that I do find a moment to get into the office and write if I'm working on something. And the key for me, and I mean, before I was published, and I was writing all the time anyway, but never with the full belief that it would ever get read by anyone but my long-suffering husband. I used to sometimes stop writing for a period of time. I'd still be doing my kind of freelance writing, but the actual novels I'd stop because I'd just run out of steam for a bit, leave it for a bit, go back to it. And that's the worst feeling in the world, really, because you've then got to read it all before you can really get the thread back. So now when I'm working on something, I don't give myself a day off. Even if I just write half an hour, 20 minutes, I try and pick up the thread every day, because then it's all alive. And I think even when I'm not writing, my subconscious is beavering away on the storyline, and ideas will come as long as I'm activating that every day. So yeah, I try and get in the mornings, because I think you can make time then. Quite often there's a kind of slump after the kids get up, even if they've not gone to school, and really just fit it in at some point every day. That's as close to a routine as I've managed anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've found that my best time to write is really early in the morning before the children get up. I never used to be an early person, but I found that doing it really early in the morning before the kind of world starts to kind of get into, before people are asking for things of you.
That's it.
So on. So yeah, there's just that kind of clear mind at a computer. It's I never realised what a luxury it was until now.
Oh, that's right.
How about you, Eve? How do you write? What's your kind of?
Well, I'm similar in a way to Gillian. So when I've got a day off, I work in the morning. So I always write in the morning if I can. But I work part-time in a school library now. So when I'm in the library, I write in the evening instead. And when I was first published, so when 7 Days was written, I was working full-time. So I always say that I was working full-time and I had 2 very young children. So I used to allocate myself an hour a night to write. And this used to be when my husband was welcoming the kids. And I used to reward myself with EastEnders because I'm a huge EastEnders fan. So I wouldn't let myself watch EastEnders until I'd written 1,000 words. So that was kind of like my motivation to write every night. So I'm similar to Gillian in that I have to keep writing, because if I stop, I find that I just lose it. I just can't keep, I just find I just lose all motivation for it, and I really struggle to get back into it and struggle to find the thread. So I really kind of try and make myself write something every day, even if it is just a few 100 words or whatever, even if it's just waffle and I have to go back and change it later on. I think it just helps to get those words on the page. So when I'm off, when I've got a day off, I write in the morning when the kids are at school, and when I'm working, then I come back and I do some in the evening, maybe when the kids are in the bath or when they're upstairs quiet, I do a little bit in the evening. So I try and do a little bit every day, sometimes in the weekends as well. But it just helps just to keep pattering at it, really. I think that just works for me quite well. So I don't really have a really structured routine like maybe some people that haven't got a job as well, but it works well for me.
How do you block out the noise then, Eve? If you're kind of do you have like a space in your house that nobody's allowed in, for example, or how do you kind of switch from one thing to
another?
I
don't really. When I was first writing for my first 2 books that I wrote, I didn't have a space. I was in the living room, so I had noise all around me, and I don't really know how I blocked it out. I just did it. I just made myself focus on that work. So I've had people ask me, I've had people say to me, I don't know how to write a book because I've got kids, I've got noise, I've got everything else. I said, well, I just kind of made myself, I don't really know what the answer is to that. I just made myself do it. I made myself just focus on this work and think, if I can just get these words out, then I reward myself with some rest time. Now I tend to work in my office, and the kids are older now, they do give me a little bit more space to get on with it. So I'm a little bit luckier now. But they've still got demands. They still don't always, if they want something, they're not going to not come to me. You know what kids are like. I just think I'm quite good at just just shutting off, and just when I want to write, I will write, and I will just shut off the rest of the world. And I think you have to be quite hard and quite strict, and just kind of, this is my time and I'm going to focus on it, and you lot are just going to have to wait for 5 minutes while I do this. But it can be quite hard to do sometimes. I think as a parent and a mum, that can be quite hard to do. I
like the idea of giving yourself a reward of EastEnders at the end.
Definitely, whatever floats your boat. If it's a hot bath or, a cup of tea, a slice of cake, whatever you need, just to say, if I've written 200 words, 300 words, what is my reward? Mine was EastEnders, yours might be, I don't know, slice of chocolate cake. But whatever suits you, it can really work, I think.
And how about you, Kate? What does your day look like, or how do you come into what you're doing?
Well, I'm just going to say actually, noise cancelling headphones are really useful if you haven't got your own space, which I don't. I'm working at the kitchen table, and often I'm working in the evening, so my husband's watching television. We've got like ear defenders for my son for some. Yeah. There we go. Ear defenders, and then you can't hear anything. So I don't have a proper routine because I'm a bit chaotic. My kids are still quite young and they get up early, so it's hard to get up before them. So I kind of fit it in when I can. If I can steal a bit of time out of the working day, then I'll do it first thing, like usually half an hour in the morning, or in the evening. I'll do it then. But it is difficult, especially because I'm writing historical fiction. I know what you mean about losing the thread. It's also like if you come out of that world, it's really hard to get back into it. But I don't write every day, and I know I should, but I think also don't beat yourself up if you can't. And one tip a friend gave me is, even if you don't have time to write or you just haven't got the energy, try and read what you've written, like just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, so you keep the thread of it going. So I'm a very bad example. I don't have a proper routine. I don't write every day. Everything happens slowly, but sometimes it's like that. And I think I really respect people who are really focused and carve out a set time and stick to it. I'm really bad at doing that. But yeah, noise cancelling headphones and just reading it through to keep on top of it is what I do to try and keep going.
I think you're right though, Kate. Different things work for different people, don't they? And you find your kind of pace that works best with whatever your kind of situation is. So and it's obviously working for you because you've had your book published and you're working on your second. So how about you, Sharon? What is your week, your day?
The whole of my routine has gone out the window this past year, like most people. And I find it really hard to work at home, you know, in the sort of domestic space where my kids are older anyway, so I don't have to be around for them all the time. They're much older. But I still find it quite hard to be at home because I can see the washing and I can, you know, the idea of what I'm going to have to cook for dinner is in the back of my head. So normally I would go out to the library. I work part-time. So on the days where I'm not working in my day job, I will treat the day as a working day and go out in the morning to the library. So I'm really missing the libraries at the moment, but I work in the library, I write in libraries because I quite like that sort of background noise as well. That sort of, I don't know what you call it. It's not white noise, but you know, just the noise of other people doing stuff in the background. And I think that's something that comes from growing up in a big family and never having my own bedroom till I left home and stuff like that. You know, I find it more productive if I know, you know, I don't like silence really. And I don't like being where I can see the washing up. So I like to go to the library and be there for sort of 6 hours and yeah, treat it. And quite often I can be there for 6 hours and not write anything until the 3rd or 4th hour, I just have to say. But it's just, you know, getting into that zone. Yeah, and once I'm in it, I can, you know, I can kind of write quite a lot quite quickly. So
when we were talking about the noise cancelling headphones as well, what I have on mine is I don't have music on it. It's like cafe sounds, so it's like that white noise chatter, but so I can kind of fool myself into thinking, even if I'm at home and the kids are like doing whatever they're doing, but I can kind of trick myself into being somewhere else, which is
And interestingly, my daughter, when she was revising for her exams, she had like the sound of rain on constantly on her computer because she said she just needed that noise. So yeah, it is different for every person, but yeah, but I do have, when I'm in the middle of writing or sort of really into it, I have quite a strict routine, and it is like almost like approaching it like a work day.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I think it's interesting with that that kind of sensory thing, that for some people noise is really productive, and for others you have to be in kind of complete silence as well. But yeah, maybe part of that is how we grew up, and as you say, being in a kind of a busy, buzzy family, that's also something that's kind of quite kind of calming and normal while you're writing. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, some great answers there. And yeah, I like the variety because no one size fits all for sure. So the next question that we've got, I'm going to start with you, Kate, and what our Crawley writers want to know is where you get your inspiration from.
Okay, that's a tough one because I don't really know. I think sometimes I just get really interested in particular things and they just feel interesting and bright and kind of almost look like there's a glow around them. Like it's been particular periods of history, like so the Renaissance is my first novel, and then the Bronze Age I'm writing about now. And I just get really interested and want to find out more and read more and know everything about it. But also sometimes things just pop into my head, like a scene or an image or a character, and then I want to know what they're doing and where they're going and follow it. And I think it's just being interested in the whole world and the fact that there's kind of a story in everything. You know, everywhere you look, there's a story happening on the street with people talking, or birds, grass, cups, bowls. There's a story everywhere, and it's just kind of let in. But I think I'm particularly interested in history, because I'm interested in the layers of what was there before and what's there now, what you can still see and what's gone. So I find anything old quite inspiring, kind of old houses. Looks like I like the layers of knowing who's lived in a house, who was there before, maybe how their lives interact with the people who are there now. So I find that particularly interesting, like the way the past kind of bleeds through into the present. That's what gets me.
So for your with the Book of Secrets, you know, talking about it, the Catholic printing presses.
Yeah.
So did you have to kind of did you know about that, or did you want to bring that into the story, or kind of which, I suppose, which sort of came first?
So I found out about them as I went along. I think I just knew originally that I wanted to write something set in that period, and I was kind of looking for a setting, and initially I was looking at kind of just the underworld and the gangs that existed at that time. And then I started reading about the printers at that time, and it's a very interesting kind of rambunctious world. And then once you find out about the Catholics and the secret printing presses, I was like, okay, well that's really interesting, and I want to know more about that. And as a writer, it's just I'm kind of writing about writers and writing about book production. That's really fascinating to me anyway.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Then I'm going to ask Gillian that same question.
So there's a similarity there with the way ideas come to me, and I do think that they come to me. I think sometimes when you know that you want to be starting a new book, or you want to think of a story, you sort of open something in your mind that allows those ideas to come. But often I just get this image of a central scene where everything's happening, and I think, yeah, and you think, well, how did the character get there? So it feels like it just pops into my head. But I think when I look back at my writing, especially when I look back at something I've written maybe a couple of years ago, I realise how much of what's going on in my life has actually fed into what I've written. It's really interesting because you think, oh, I thought of that all by myself, and you think, oh no, I think that's that person I met that time has made me think that. And the other thing I thought I'd say is that this is the advantage of not being published at the age of 7 or 9 or whatever I hope to do, because I've had several different jobs along the way, and I've had lots of different things happen to me, and I feel like I've got a lot of stuff that I can draw on emotionally and in terms of actual events and workplaces and colleagues. And while I may not directly draw on one particular thing or incident, there's elements of my life that come in and support, and I'll maybe look at a bit more. But I think that does help to have that kind of life experience. So yeah, so some of it just seems to pop into my head, and some of it comes from the things that have happened either presently or in the past or near to me, or things I've seen on the news, and it all kind of gets mixed together sometimes.
Thanks. And then I would I've just recently read Everything is Fine, and so in that she's talking, one of her clients is a writer as well, and so that experience of like writing another writer's, how did that feel? That
was I mean, that was really the idea of someone whose ideas were very based in the real world versus someone who's drew all their self-esteem and self-worth from things that were happening online. So it was a cross between those two worlds that I really drew on in that particular scene. Funnily enough, someone who read the book sent me a website with this psychologist that looked exactly the way I described the one in the book, and said, oh, was this who you based it on? And I thought, well, I've never heard of him before, and actually he's written a book that's quite similar to the one my character writes. So I don't know, maybe I'm psychic, but yeah, no, it was interesting. I did speak to, because I knew I wanted Jessica in that book to work in PR and promotion, because it all goes with that, the way we are online, and we're sort of all our own little PR machine online, aren't we? And so I did speak to a PR person who works on her own, and got some ideas of the kind of demands her clients make on her as well. So that was a small amount of research, but And that's the one where she said, you know, people have got very unrealistic expectations now of what kind of coverage their lives might get. So they want to be in the Daily Telegraph when they're just they've got a little kitchen startup and that sort of thing. So not sure if I answered the question, but yeah, it was quite a strange idea to kind of step back and think of myself as, or my main character as someone who's promoting rather than doing the writing themselves, definitely.
Thank you. And then, so Eve, you've written for, you know, lots of the different age groups. So do you have to have kind of different inspiration sources for the different age groups?
Yeah, so my inspiration is really scattered. So my first series of books were very much inspired by what I was working with and what I was dealing with. So I sort of fell into it really because I was always writing. I was always trying to write adult books. I was trying to write thrillers and that sort of thing. That was what I was attempting to write when I was at that time. And then I was working in the school and I was working directly with young people and their issues and their problems. And I mean, again, it's touching really on what Gillian was saying, that I certainly found that, you know, you touch on things that you've experienced. So, for example, I was working very directly with bullies and working closely with bullies and victims of bullying. And it brought back all the memories of when I was at school and I got bullied for being poor and for having tatty clothes and having frizzy hair. And so all those emotions came back, and that's how 7 Days got written. I mean, I wrote it in 3 months because it just brought back all those emotions of being bullied and all that horrible feelings. And it was just such a personal book for me, I guess. And then all the books after that, you know, toxic relationships, mental health, young carers, it's all things that I was working with young people that, you know, I knew that was really important for teenagers and that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I guess the inspiration came from the young people I was working with, although I wasn't, you know, it wasn't obviously replicating their cases, it was just the inspiration from them. And then I've also done historical books for teenagers. So I've been writing the Dick Kerr Girls, about the first ever football team in World War I. So that's involved a lot of research. And that's come from absolutely loving football and being a passionate working class girl, you know, and I never thought I'd write historical books. That was not really my bag, but I've absolutely loved it, you know, researching World War I and, you know, researching female football and finding out that women's football was banned for 50 years, which I think people didn't actually know. You know, it's just been wonderful. So inspiration comes from things that you're passionate about sometimes. You know, for me, it was football. So that was something else that rocketed. And then Duckling, my adult book, was inspired by me sitting in the bath. Often my deepest thoughts come when I'm sitting in the bath or sitting on the toilet. And I was sitting in the bath and I was just thinking, because sometimes my thoughts or my plots come from a question, you know, a question in my head, like what if this happened? And I was sitting in the bath and I thought, what if you were asked to look after a child and the parent didn't come back? And I was thinking of me when I was much younger, when I was in my early 20s, and I was quite awkward and I was quite shy and not very confident. So I had this character immediately of a sort of socially awkward person who's asked to look after a kid, you know, just while the mum pops out, just next to the shop, and then the mum doesn't return. And this sort of just spiraled then into this, actually, this could be a story, you know, this socially awkward woman. And immediately I knew she was going to love Columbo. That just came into my head, and she was going to love mysteries. And that's just how it started. It just started with a question while I was laying in the bath. So, you know, it's just weird. For me, I always think I'm a bit of a magpie. I take things from what I see and what I experience, and questions that pop into my head, conversations that I have with people, and I mix it all up and I produce all sorts. Sometimes they're wonderful and sometimes they're just drafts that get deleted, but you know, it's where it comes from. It's just this concoction of things in my head.
So do you think that, would you say then I suppose the process was quite different with like the Dick Kerr Girls? You know, obviously you kind of had the idea of that, but then you needed to do some research. Did you need to research before you started writing? Whereas with Duckling, it sounds like it was more like character driven.
Yeah, so Duckling's definitely character driven book, that shadow of a doubt. That all started with that character coming into my head and that question coming into my head. Dick Kerr Girls was a little bit different because Dick Kerr Girls my agent actually mentioned to me that the publisher UCLan was looking for somebody to write about the Dick Kerr girls. And she asked me to put together a brief of whether I could think of an idea of a book. So then I went away and said, well, I think, I could do a series of this, I could write this. And I sort of put together a brief of what I thought. So I was kind of approached by my agent because she knew that I loved football and I loved, working class values and community. It was something I was really passionate about. So I was not so inspired by the idea, but inspired once I found out about it, if that makes sense. So I was drawn to that through somebody else. And then the other, everything else has just come from, I think I've always been more character led. I think all my work has come from characters first and through questions in my mind, what would happen if it's, even the Dick Kerr book, one of the characters, the second book is Freddie, a brother of the main character. And immediately I was like, right, what's going to happen with him? What if he is somebody who's suffered a trauma? How's that going to affect his relationship with the girls? So it's all questions that I'm asking myself all the time with the characters. So, I am very character-driven writer. I think it's always important to me that characters have got a lot of strength and truth and that they shine through.
Brilliant, thank you. I've realised that we've kind of haven't got very far into our questions, and we're going to start running out of time. We'll just quickly go to you, Sharon, then, and where you find your inspiration.
Yes, sort of. Fairly similar to Eve in some ways. My work's all very character driven. There's not a lot of plot, I have to say, but I think I draw my inspiration from. I've said quite a lot with this novel that's just come out. I'm very interested in the stories behind ordinary people. So, the kind of the stories that don't get told, the people that are often invisible. So people like my own family, immigrants, working class people, older women, basically the people that we kind of walk past every day, or the people that are any of us really. So that, that's my inspiration. But it's probably started being my inspiration, particularly because, I am like most writers, I'm a big reader, and I just wasn't seeing myself, those people, my family, my friends, reflected in the stories I was reading. So that was kind of my first real kind of inspiration and instigation. It was like, I think it was Toni Morrison who said, if you don't see yourself in the books you read, go and write one. So, kind of taking that advice. But yeah, that is really what drives me still. I'm very, very interested in those untapped, really rich kind of stories that are often very, very extraordinary, and stories of immigrants particularly, of these huge journeys that people have made across the world for all sorts of reasons, and settled in kind of often unfriendly and unfamiliar places. So yeah, that really drives me to kind of want to just I want to be able to tell some of those stories that are just not the stories that we're seeing enough of, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
thanks, Sharon.
So I'm thinking we'll take another couple of questions from our list, and then we've got some questions from people who are watching. So then we'll ask a couple of those. So I'm just thinking, one of the questions that our Crawley writers were interested to find out about was what happens if you get writer's block, if you have that moment of panic where you're looking at a blank screen and don't know what to write. So Kate, if I come to you first, so see, this one's been published, well received, brilliant. You have your book out in the world. You're writing your second book at the moment. So I guess there's that kind of additional pressure as well, because you have a book out. And does it happen? Do you get writer's block? Do you find it quite easy to just kind of put words down on the page?
No, I think I have a very strong resistance to starting writing. And I think probably especially at the moment, because there's 1,000 other things I should be doing or could be doing. So I have to make myself sit down and do it. because I don't necessarily come to it with a huge amount of love and feeling like I just want to get started, which is a shame, because when I was young, I just used to sit down and I just loved writing. I'd sit and write for hours. But I think when you're fitting it around everything else, maybe it becomes harder. But if I get really stuck, then I will go for a walk, do something else, do some cleaning, kind of do something physical to try and shake myself up, or just write a load of rubbish and just say it doesn't matter what it is, just get it down. And sometimes you reach a point where you are stuck and you have to share it with other people or just put it away for a bit. And I think every writer gets to those points where you just don't know what to do with it anymore. And so you just have to leave it. Or I've got a writers group, I've got a brilliant writers group that I met while I was in Bristol, and I still share things with them. And I think that's really helpful if you can find a community of writers, whether that's a group or social media, can actually be really helpful, and that you can bounce ideas off. So I wouldn't say I've ever got to a point where I just can't write at all, even in difficult times, because if I sit down and make myself, something will come out. But it doesn't, I don't always dive into it thinking, yay, I'm going to start writing. And I think that's okay. I think, again, there's kind of pressure sometimes to feel like you have to love writing with your whole heart and soul to make it special. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you hate it and it's really boring, but you have to do it anyway, and then you will get to the happy bits and it will get finished. So, yeah.
That's interesting as well, Kate, when you mentioned about the writers' groups. Are other writers in writers' groups? Do you have other people that you share work with? Sharon? Yeah.
You know I am, Anna, because I'm in a writers' group with you.
Yes, I am in a writers' group with you.
It's incredibly useful to be able to share work and show work, and actually I think it's very, very important to get that critical feedback in a safe space, particularly. So, you know, I'm a big advocate for writers' groups.
How about you, Gillian, on that? Do you kind of share your work with others, or what's, you know, those kind of early stages?
Yeah, so I mean, on and off I've been in writers' groups. I prefer, I'm in groups online, and that's one type of group. And then I did set up a little, because I live in rural France, it can be difficult to get anything going. And for about a year, maybe a year and a half, I did manage to run a writers' group in the local town. It was for anyone who was writing in English, so it didn't have to be English people per se, but there's a few people around who were giving it a go, and some people just wanted something to do. So, and we became a lovely little group, but it kind of fizzled out, as these things sometimes do eventually. So I do miss that, and I might try, if and when things are normal again, I might try and do that again, because I did find it was nice to have that accountability, as well as having those people to bounce the ideas off, just that accountability of, you're going to talk about what you've been doing. So you have to actually have been doing something writing related, and that kept me going. And that was all pre-publication. And now, I mean, I've got a very, very hands-on agent, and I don't feel I have to kind of finesse things before I send. She'll happily look at 100 words if I want her to, or an idea. And she's great at also shooting down my ideas when they need to be shot down. Because sometimes I'll get oh my goodness, I've got to write about this, it's going to be so brilliant. I'll put it down, she'll go, well, maybe, but actually this. And I'll think, she's right, isn't she? And I just think, God, I could have written, in the past, without her, I might have written that whole book, only to find that out later. Not that she ever sort of tells me not to write something, but she'll give me her firm and frank opinion. And I think having someone that's willing to do that is amazing. I've been with my husband for 20 years, and he's one of the first people I showed a fledgling sort of novel to. And everyone else I'd shown it to in the past, sort of, it's my sister and my mum, and they'd said, oh, it's really good. And so that's what I thought he was going to say. And he said, well, I like this, but I didn't like that. And I would felt absolutely devastated. But that is the kind of, you need someone that you can trust to tell you straight. So whether that's a group or whether that's a particular person or your age, and that might change over time. But if someone's willing to invest in you, I guess, a bit emotionally and care enough to tell you when you're going down the wrong path, I think that's, whether that's in a group or an individual or whatever, that's what you really do need that along the way.
Do you have that, Eve? Do you like that kind of critical friend, or you know, do you have people that you bounce ideas off?
Yeah, online I'm part of groups. So there's a group that I'm, you know, other authors that we share ideas and we agonize over, and which is great. And I'm part of a debut 2022 group which I set up, and we're, you know, that's growing, which is wonderful. So that's a lovely community as well, and hopefully that will continue to grow. So that's a lovely thing as well, because I know that's something obviously Gillian's been part of with her debut group. I was part of a very strong writing community when I first started writing, when I probably needed it the most, when I was really, really insecure and I really didn't know where I was going and I really wanted advice. It was a really, really good online group that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. I think it exists, it's not very good, but that's where I met loads of writing friends, and actually we're still in touch. And a lot of them are published now. We used to share work and upload work online, so it is a really, really useful thing to have. Again, I'm quite similar to, it's funny, isn't it, how similar we all are, but my husband is my frame of reference. He always reads my first draft of things, and he is very critical as well. But again, it's what I need. You know, I need somebody who can read it and go, do you know what, that really isn't working, or, you know, I think you need to change that a little bit. And I get very sulky and go and storm off in the bathroom for half an hour, and then I realise that actually, yeah, he's right. My agent's the same. My agent doesn't give me any, you know, she'll tell me, she'll say if it's not working, and again, I'll have a sulk for a few days and then realise actually, yeah, she's dead right, and that isn't working. So I've got good people around me that will advise me as well. But I really do think writing communities, when you're, especially when you're starting out, because it is really daunting. And it is so up and down as well. Even when you're published, it's so up and down, you know, the whole thing. You know, you can have a really good day, then you can have a horrible day, you know, and it's, you know, you need people to hold your hand and help you through it, because, you know, it's not the nicest career, you know, you can have a horrible day.
It's been quite lonely for everybody over the last year as well. And I think that's a really good kind of tip for writers at all different stages of their career, about joining these different communities, and the fact that there are so many different kind of online communities that you can join.
And I think as well, one thing that, you know, just to get out there as well, is I think that it's so, because you're on your own and you see other people's successes, and you see other people's, like, because you have to put your successes on there online, you can sometimes feel like everything's going wrong for you, and, you know, and you don't concentrate on your own journey, which is so important. So I think, you know, when you're with other writers and you're talking to them regularly, you just get that sense of balance and that sense of just, actually, you're doing all right, you know, you're fine. So it just gives you that, you know, it stops your insecurities eating you, because a lot of writers are very insecure and very anxious. I think that's just kind of how we are, kind of how we're bred. So it just helps you get through it.
I'm just quite conscious of time, and I was just thinking maybe we should just go and ask a quick question from our that people have submitted. Have a look here.
Can you see it, Anna?
Yes, I can. So if I just throw this question out and then see if anybody wants to answer this. So Hira has asked, is there anything you struggle with as a writer?
Which I guess is what Eve was just touching on then, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
imposter syndrome.
It's very, imposter syndrome for me is a big thing. I think as well, coming from working class, I think Sharon touched on this before, coming from a working class background, I always feel like I don't belong, you know, I'm not really a writer, someone's going to take this away from me one day. You know, it's really, really hard, but I think anybody can suffer from it. But I think it definitely is worse when you come from a background where you don't necessarily feel that you fit in, you know, your face doesn't fit really. So that's been my biggest struggle really, and I still struggle with it, and I still struggle with confidence and self-esteem and everything else. I just have to kind of talk myself through it really, and have good people around me.
That's a really good tip as well, having the good people around you as well. Because yes, I think imposter syndrome is something that people suffer with, throughout, don't they? That at what point do you you kind of own it? And so yes, having good people around you, absolutely. So yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of the people who are in our writers groups, who are all at different stages of their writing, and also maybe for some of the people who are watching as well, who are writers at different points. If you had one kind of tip that you'd say, I know we talked about joining a writers group online would be a really good way, kind of getting up in the morning and just, or at some point writing, even if you think it's rubbish, just writing. Is there anything else that think just a quick line that you think would be a pearl of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
Any of us?
Thank you.
So that if you want, because I mean, it's not particularly technical advice. It's just to say that I used to feel, and I still do feel deep inside, sort of quite insecure as well, like Eve. And I try to think of all the people who are doing really well in their career, not just in writing, but in all sorts of things. And they don't have any goods to back it up. They just believe in themselves, and they're a little misguided, some of them, to believe in themselves, but they do. And this gets you so far. And I think I'm going to just sort of project myself as that kind of person. I'm not going to let my own insecurity stop me trying this, and just keep on keeping on, really. I finished my first novel at 24 and got my first novel published at 42, and learned a lot of lessons along the way. And I think I wouldn't have given up even if I hadn't got published. I might feel depressed about it sometimes, and still do sometimes, but I think, yeah, just don't ever let yourself talk yourself out of doing it. Just, if you've got that passion to do it, then just keep going.
That feels like a really positive place to leave this as well. That if you're doing it, just keep doing it, keep on keeping on. And yes. So thank you all so much for all your kind of contributions. I'm just going to hand over to Sam to wrap up.
So just thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to all our brilliant writers. It's been so interested, and it's really exciting to kind of see how this has worked tonight, because we've got 2 more panel events that are going to be coming up in June. We've got on the 10th of June writing Life Balance, and that's with Jo Lovett-Turner, Laura Wilkinson, Luce Brett and Beth Miller. And then on the 24th of June, we've got Finding Inspiration, which we've touched on a little bit today, but that's with Lorraine Brown, Suhaila Al-Bushra, Louise Fain and Zoe Somerville. So do check out the Eventbrite where you book this. There'll be links to that stuff. And follow us on all the social media things, and sign up to our mailing list. And we'll be able to come back. And I think it's brilliant to see how everyone's questions, and just thank you.
We just thank our partners as well, which is New Writing South and Crawley Museum, and also thanks to the Arts Council as well for funding the project. And mainly thanks to all our fabulous writers for giving us their time, their expertise. Thank you.